At 19200 onboard fault prediction center on a 90000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit as possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit prior to failure. Mission control, this is X-ray Dullea 1, transmission concluded. That was it.
Mr. Dullea, no coward would have been proud of you.
Oh yeah. He always believed actors should come to the first day of rehearsal with all their lines learned. And I normally never do that, but I just finished an off-Broadway play with Marsha Mason about 3 weeks ago, just closed, and it was a huge line load. And I have an older brain now that does much harder to learn lines at my age than it was when I was a young actor, much harder. And I said, I better learn, and I had 6 months to learn it. And I studied it every single day. And yes, no car would have been proud because I arrived at the first day of rehearsal word perfect. It was the first time in my life I've ever done that. Anyway, back to science fiction.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Tom has a question. First for Mr. Dullea, you were asked to reprise your role in the 2010 film. What was your initial reaction when you heard that a sequel was being produced?
Well, I was living back east. Most of my career I lived, I was a New York actor, and out of 52 years of professional acting, I've only lived in LA for 6. But at this point, I was back in Connecticut, where I live now, and I went out to do something, I can't remember what it was, and I saw in Variety that they were going to make a sequel. And I hadn't heard from anybody, and I didn't have a very good agent at the time. So what I did was I called out of the blue, just cold called, this was 1983 or 4, so that from 66, 76, almost 20 years later. And I called the director, Peter Hyams. I got through to him, I got a secretary, explained who I was. I said, I hope I can speak to him. And he got on the phone with me, and I said, Peter, you know, you probably figure 18 years later, I look so much different and older, you probably never even thought of using me, but I think we should have a meeting before you make that decision. I think I'll surprise you. And so we did. We met in the commissary, we had a conversation, and later that day when I got home, my agent called and said I had a firm offer to do the role, and that's how that happened.
That was one of the more striking things I noticed about that presentation is you nailed it. You looked precisely the way you looked in the original
well,
film.
I hadn't aged, a little different now, but I hadn't aged that much. At that point, I was fortunate. I inherited some good genes from my dad, and I had really visually looked that much older. It was kind of interesting because the only kind of wonderful thing about that film is nobody involved with it had been involved in 2001. Not one person, except the voice of Hal. This time, they had pre-recorded the Canadian actor, and so I had this comforting feeling of working with an old friend.
Now, Arthur Clarke dipped his toes back into the 2001 universe several times, including a novel which features the return of Dr. Poole, who coincidentally, the character is about your age in the book. And I was wondering if anyone's ever approached you about producing the next novel in the series featuring your character.
I've been retired 18 years. I don't.
But I haven't heard of any plans to make a film on it, have you?
No. You know, these are things, people say these things to me, you know, you should produce or do this or do that. You know, movies are so expensive anymore that, you know, and everybody who makes a decision is 22 years old and it's all by committee. It's a whole new business. You know, on Keir in my day, you could do something like, I ended up doing the television version of Bus Stop, which was a very famous movie. You're probably too young to know it, but they already had it cast. The guy did it in Broadway, the guy did it in the movie, and my agent called up and said, I know a guy who's probably be the best bodega there ever was. I don't know. And so the studio, Dominic Dunn, the guy who directed all the Dirty Harrys, all those guys were in an office, and I came in there. They'd never seen me before. And Buddy Epson was there to read with me, and I just kicked the hell out of the audition, and they replaced the guy that had done it on Broadway with me, a totally unknown actor, and I went to work the next Monday with all these famous people, Marilyn Maxwell, Joseph Cotton, everyone. And the point that I'm trying to make, that's not going to happen very much anymore. It's a different industry. When young people say to me, hey, look, my cousin's an actor and he would really, do you have any advice on how he should get ahead or anything like that? First off, it's almost impossible even to get an agent now. You know, I mean, it's just a completely, where there used to be a few, 3,000 or 4,000 people, you know, who would, every year, the Greyhound buses would drop all these people from all over America to come and be actors, and then 3 or 4 years later, 98% of them went back in the bus and the others became waiters. But you understand where I'm coming from. It's a different deal now. You can't, I wouldn't even attempt to try to go in and talk to the 23-year-old people. You know what I mean? Hi, I'm Gary Lockwood.
Thank you very much.
They all work for some company or corporation.
No, I want to jump in and ask you guys a quick question. Just getting back to the movie 2001, and obviously since this is, you mentioned even the movie said, I know a lot of people come out of the movie and said, what the hell just happened? I have no idea what this movie's about. So, you guys ever get that question? People ever say to you, what is this movie about?
Never have gotten that question, ever. People want to know what this movie's about.
Has anyone ever asked you what Kubrick was like?
Never. No, but the short answer in terms of what the movie means, what the ultimate means, and that was when it first was released, you know, that's what Cocktail Party Talk was all about. What does this movie mean? And I'm not trying to avoid it, but I think there's a truth to what I'm about to say, and that is, Kubrick was a great cinema artist. He's still studying in film school, just the way Orson Welles' films, Citizen Kane, is part of curriculum when you go to film school. And he was beyond heads above most filmmakers, and therefore his work are works of art. And it's analogous to any work of art. If you go to a museum and look at a Picasso or even the Mona Lisa, which is more realistic painting, you know, there's that famous smile. You know, is it sarcastic? Is it sexy? Is it, what does the smile mean? Or a Picasso, what do those three eyes mean in that kind of distorted figure? And they're not allowed to answer the question, they not being the painters. And what's far more valid is what happens between you and what's the experience you have when you stand in front of that painting? And that is as valid an answer to what any painting means. There's no universal answer to the meaning of works of art. And I think it's the same, I think you can have many people agree that it's beautiful. And I think that's the same thing with 2001. Kubrick was always enigmatic in his filmmaking and didn't, like most films, Hollywood films, that kind of tie up the plots in comfortable, predictable little bows for you so that you understood everything. And I think that's what 2010 was, an attempt maybe to explain 2001. Not so much on the part of Arthur Clarke as it was on the part of the filmmakers in Hollywood. But so that's my answer.
That is a perfect answer. I think I agree. What about you, Gary Lockwood? Yep.
Well, you know, the film is a language. It's a language painted by a camera rather than a brush. And what I want to say to you is that, you know, this thing about typecasting or things of that nature, I once had I was under contract to a great director years ago, Amelia Kazan. And he was a strange duck and everything, but, you know, his attitude, and the guy who directed Dirty Harry, Siegel, what was his name? I forgot. Yeah. Anyway, they all said to me, you know, if you can get as close to the character when they walk in the door, if they can talk or walk or do something, here's what you got to remember about making a movie. It's a whole bunch of pieces, and you shoot it, you shoot it, you shoot it, in the case 2001, years of shooting before you assemble. And so when you're in the editing room, and like this Roger Ebert, this idiot that's on TV, goes, oh, the editing was crisp and wonderful. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Editing is being in a room with a whole bunch of pieces and saying, okay, how can we assemble this close-up with this cut, with this master? The next time you watch something, look at how it's painting the picture of what it's trying to say about the story. Now, if you have an actor that's got the right look for what he does,